Be the right club. Be the right club today. Yes!
Again, has to be careful of the speed.
What a comeback season for Hal Sutton.
Come right back toward the hole. Come on in. That's the second eagle he's made it for this week.
17 years later, Hal Sutton is the Players' champion.
He's got it going right at the flagstick. It'll be up. It is.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Be the Right Club Today podcast. Hal, what's happening?
Well, we're making these changes inside the academy here. That's fun.
Yeah, we've got a little new, not a new, but a temporary backdrop for the podcast for those watching on YouTube. Yeah. We're in my bay today instead of Hal's because we're adding some cool new technology to the back area, adding putt view, adding some new simulators. Kind of exciting.
Yeah, it is. We're going to maximize the use of the footprint that we have, and it's just people wanting to learn, and we're trying to help them.
That's exactly right. So it was the World Golf Championship WGC match play event was this last week. Did you play in a lot of match play events?
I played in a lot as an amateur, and then I played a couple of match play events. They were not plentiful because they didn't want to lose the best players in the first round. TV didn't like that, so the format that they're using now doesn't allow that to happen. So, did you have success in match play? Obviously, as an amateur, you had a great success. Yeah, and I was pretty successful in the Ryder Cup as a match play. It's a tough format, though. I mean, you got to get busy right off the bat. It's different than stroke play.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit. There was some chatter on Twitter about some of the guys talking about how their disdain for match play. What are your thoughts on match play?
Well, in order to be successful at match play, you got to get on the accelerator right off the bat.
Right.
A little bit of mind games in match play. I'd give a guy 3 or 4 footer on the first hole, and I think in his mind after that it was always, is he going to give me another 3 or 4 footer? And I think it spelled a couple of things. It spelled I had confidence in my own ability to do that, and it put something in their mind. You don't have those sort of things happening in stroke play.
Yeah, you're just prepared to make every
It's
putt.
just a completely different mindset to play match play versus, stroke play.
Right. Were there any other strategies you tried to incorporate? I mean, I know you talked about Tiger at the Players. That's a match play event at that point. At the last couple holes coming down the stretch, it's you versus him. I mean, it's not really match play, but you're kind of viewing it like that. Like on 18, you talked about wanting to hit last to make the decision, basically to put the pressure on or do whatever. Did you try to do the same thing in match play, or did you just more or less play your own game?
Well, I played my own game, but I made decisions and changes in my plan based on what the other player did.
Yeah.
And that game plans don't change usually in stroke play.
Yeah.
So you dictate what you're fixing to do based on what he did.
Yeah, so if he gets up on a tough par 3 and hits a really good shot to 5 or 6 feet, will that cause you to change your target?
Could.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could.
Take it on a little bit more. There's no risk if you short side yourself, big deal, you're going to lose the hole anyway. You're going to probably make birdie. So,
right.
There was another interesting debate about, and it's something I didn't get a lot of experience with, and I don't think you really did either, but green reading books. What are your thoughts on, having these books that basically tell the grade of the slope of every green?
Well, green reading is an art. And I personally don't like aids to help enhance that. I think that's like a guy that can play a specialty shot that another guy can't play. You know, there's advantages to being good at things.
Yep.
And there's disadvantages to not being good at something. And, you know, I love science. I love the technology in the game and all that sort of stuff. But I still love the fact that we've got to do some things on our own. Yeah. And I love the art. That's the artistry in the game. And I'm not a big fan of green reading books. I'm not.
Yeah.
So, you know, Hal Sutton doesn't have any say-so in what they do,
Sure.
but that's my opinion.
Colin Montgomery came out and said something about it. There was a couple other players. I think Lee Westwood said something about it too. You know, I just followed quick. You know, just kind of checked out briefly, but it seemed like most of them agreed with you. It seemed like they weren't as much of a fan of it.
Well, you're mentioning all the older guys too, so you know, I mean, let's just be truthful about this. I mean, you and I, because of age differences, have a few differences of opinion, and you know, the game moves on past a lot of us. You know, it moved on past Hogan and it moved on past Nicholas, and it continues to move on past us. And you know, some things probably are for the better, and some things aren't necessarily for the better. But I mean, the older guy, we probably always like to see it. You face the same challenges I faced,
Right.
and you don't have to face the same challenges I faced.
Correct.
You know, I let you hit my old persimmon driver in there, and it didn't fare quite as well for you.
No, that was a challenge that I didn't really like facing, to be honest with you. It was heavy. It's heavy and short and
It
short.
doesn't go near as far.
It wasn't as fun.
Harder to hit in the screws.
Yeah. And I played with a little bit of persimmon growing up, but definitely moved to the titanium and graphite shafts really quickly, so I didn't have to do it so much. Talk very quickly about green reading. You know, you said it was there's a skill. I didn't feel like I was ever a great green reader. I felt like when I had a caddy that on the bag that read greens really well, I was much more confident as a player, just because I tended to read straight putts breaking a little bit left to right. I grew up kind of cutting putts a little bit, and so everything kind of reads. I kind of see them left to right. So talk about, you know, your how you felt like your skill was as a green reader, how you and Freddie kind of did it together, and some of your other caddies did it.
Well, first of all, I would say I was an average green reader. I wouldn't say I was bad, and I wouldn't say I was good. The art to being a good green reader is that you start paying attention when you're 100 yards from the green. And
that's strong right there.
You know, I mean, too many people wait until they get on the putting surface, and it's really hard to see things when you're standing on top of it rather than when you're walking up to it. You can see all these little things like this.
That's really good.
And, you know, I already had my mind made up where the lowest point on the green was before I ever got on the surface. I secured that once I got on the surface. Yes, everything's going that direction. The grain's going wherever the lowest point on the green is going. And, you know, here's another point that I think is really important here. When you said you always felt better whenever you had somebody on the bag that was a good green reader, that means you turned all the decision making over to him and you just executed. Mm-hmm. So that means you committed to something.
That's right.
So many of the times people never really commit to anything. Mm-hmm. They hit an uncommitted stroke, and you can just about count on one finger how many of those are going to go in. I mean, they're just not going to go in often like that.
No, you're exactly right. And I felt like, you know, I knew that I didn't read greens really, really well. Like I would have considered myself an okay to below average green reader. But I always felt like when I had somebody on the bag that I knew read greens really well, it freed me. It took one variable out of the question. Like I would, and this is bad, but this goes back to what EJ talked about. We talked about with Jack. I would almost place the blame more on them and just say, no, I hit a good putt. He read it wrong, you know, and it freed me up even more.
Well, to that point, Freddie used to always say, why don't you get me to help you read greens more? And I said, well, Freddie, if you don't, first of all, you don't know how hard I'm going to hit it. And secondly, I mean, you can't read the putt if you don't, I mean, you got to pick the distance first, then you read the putt. Yeah. And he put indecision in my mind. If he differed with me, then, okay, who do I go with? What he thinks or what I think? Mm-hmm. And I always felt better about going with what I thought.
I'm trying to figure out the best way to ask this question, but you've helped design a couple golf courses. Did your view on green reading change or differ after you designed a golf course? Did you learn anything after designing a golf course and kind of seeing how it was built, or did it change your perspective on it at all?
Well, I built the couple that I built because I like long sweeping slopes. I don't like sharp slopes, and I just I felt like the old style greens were better than but I don't think it affected how I
no as far as how the water drains off the green or anything like that. I mean, it's
I knew a lot about that from having played competitive golf for a long time. So one of the things that I was able to do is watch what some of the best putters in the world did. I played a lot with Ben Crenshaw, and watched the way Raymond Floyd was a great putter, and I played with Raymond every Tuesday.
Yeah.
And, I watched him pay attention to things. The guys that had the best imagination, you could also build a case that they paid the most attention to things. Yeah. Did they have a good imagination because they just were born with it? Or did they have a great imagination because they saw everything?
Yeah, and they were better at painting the picture of what they wanted the ball to do versus guys that get too mechanical or trying to make too perfect of strokes and doing stuff with the mechanical side of the thing, the engineer side of the brain, versus them seeing the ball go in the hole from 15, 20 feet. I mean, I know it, a lot of the listeners at home know it. You've gotten over certain putts in your career, 20, 25 footer, and you knew it was going in. Like you could literally see it go in, and it goes in.
Well, there's a certain amount of artistry to the game. They can't take it out of it, I mean, look at Bryson right now. With everything that he's doing with his putting stroke and everything, he's trying to take as much of the artistry out of the game out of putting as he can.
Yep.
It's still art. He misses.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And he doesn't make them all. He's got a green reading book.
Yep.
He's got basically locked down on everything that he can lock down on.
Eliminating as many variables as he can.
He's eliminated all of them that he can.
Yeah. And you'll see a place like next week, like at Augusta, they're fighting to keep the artistry and the working the golf ball and playing a lot of breaks and all that stuff. Like they're trying to keep it in the game as long as they can.
Yeah, well, it's on the edge next week. I can tell you at Augusta.
For sure. Talk a little bit about just quickly what Augusta meant to you.
Well, I'll never forget, the first time I qualified to play at Augusta. I'd watched the Masters all my life, and some of the greatest scenes that a golfer has in his mind are moments that happened at Augusta. And we remember those because it's on the same golf course. Mm-hmm. The other majors move around to different places. But, that's one thing that TPC, Sawgrass, they've done by having it at the same golf course all the time. We have moments that we remember.
Yep.
And so, the first time I drove down Magnolia Lane, I couldn't believe what that was like. And anyway, long story short, I don't have a lot of fond memories at Augusta. I never played very well there. I hit the ball too low, and I tried to change my game going into Augusta where I would hit it higher, and never really hit it as well there as I hit it at other places.
Yeah.
But they're the king of long sweeping slopes with super fast greens.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot believe how fast some of the putts can get at Augusta. I mean, like spooky fast, and tour players see the fastest greens in the world all the time. The fastest green on the golf course might be the first hole.
Yeah.
I mean, I never, ever had a putt for birdie that I felt like I could be aggressive on the first hole.
Not comfortable with it.
Not comfortable with it. Virtually, I mean, you might three-putt it as easily as you one-putted it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember on 13, Tiger putting it off the green in the water, had an eagle putt, and end up making bogey. I think he two-putted the next one. Like I can think, like hole 9. If you hit it above the hole in the wrong tier there, like you can putt that thing 40 yards off the green if you're not careful.
Well, 15 you could putt it off the green into the water.
Yeah.
There's plenty of places that you just don't have to think about those sort of things at another golf course.
Yeah. Well, it's cool that we're kind of back to some normalcy and getting to watch the Masters in April again instead of in the fall like we did last year. So that's kind of cool. Well, let's get into the meat and potatoes of today's podcast. Today's podcast we wanted to do one on, we called it Swing Misconceptions. And it's basically stuff that's been talked about for a long time, really. Still talked about some today. Some of them not as much today, but still around, that a lot of our students come in and they talk about certain things like, what they've been told and what some of their playing partners tell them to do. And Hal and I kind of look at each other and kind of smile like, nope, we don't want to do that anymore. And so we're going to go through, we picked 7 or 8 of them that we've been told and thought that were correct for a long time. And whether it's high-speed cameras, whether it's TrackMan or force plates, they've kind of started to show us that there's a better way to do it. And so we're going to go through and talk about each one of them and what they've how they've kind of been explained through the last couple generations and kind of what they mean today.
Well, before we get started into this, I think I want to add that this probably has more to do with me in terms of I heard a lot of this stuff. Yep. And I want to talk about the guys that probably told us some of this stuff. Yep. They were doing the best they could at the time. Sure. They did not have the things that we have today that have proven some of these to be wrong. Yep. And, this is in no way a criticism of the other people that have maybe started these myths. And, they were taking what some of the best players in the game talked about as a feel. Yep. They didn't have high-speed cameras and technology. It's just a feel. Yep. And we all know how feels are not real sometimes.
That's exactly right.
But that's all we had back. I'm guilty. That's all I had.
Sure. And there's going to be stuff 10 years from now that we're going to look back and, I was teaching and I won't be teaching anymore. Just some little things that we thought certain things with how the grounds or ground force interaction is supposed to be, and we're gonna, as we learn more, as the science field learns more, they change some of their practices. So yep. It's all about learning and trying to get better. So awesome. Yep. All right, so the first one is probably one of my favorites, and it's one of the ones that a lot of our higher handicap players have been told, and a lot of parents tell their kids, and that's keep your eye on the ball or keep your head down. The reason that this one, we brought this one up is there's too many players that are trying to play golf right now that think that if they hit a shot, if they don't hit it solid or they top it or they chunk it, that they didn't keep their eyes on the ball or they didn't keep their head down. The analogy I like to make, and I'll go on a little rant with this, but like any of you guys that live in a big city, think about driving through a big city during rush hour traffic going 60 or 65 miles an hour, and think about all the things that you do at the same, like all the, like you can do simultaneously. Think about every place that your brain is in at that particular moment, from driving with your knee, holding a cup of coffee, changing the radio station. You got a car that just cut you off. You got another car on the left that just flipped you off because they thought you cut them off. While you're changing lanes, while you're trying to figure out where your next exit is, while you know how much gas is in the car, while this and that and this and that, all at the same time. And so we as human beings can do so many cool things like that, but we don't know where the golf ball is. Like the minute you set up, your brain knows golf ball's right there. If you whiff it, or if you completely chunk it, or if you top it or don't make good contact at all, something else happened. Chances are you moving your head was because you were too steep on the downswing and your brain said, Mayday, 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 I'm about to stick this club in the ground. I need to stand up to make a correction. Rant over. That's all I got.
Well, there's a couple of really great players, David Duval and Annika.
Annika was one, DJ now.
Yeah. So, where their head is, the ball's still here and their eyes are out here.
Yep.
The head's out there. And, you don't have to keep your eye on the ball, and you don't have to keep your head down in order to hit good shots, to be honest with you. And in fact, it hinders you totally releasing everything and creating all the speed you can keep by keeping your head down.
Yep, and a lot of teachers nowadays, we've talked about this a lot, are teaching players to release their head to aid in rotation.
Right.
And so if you don't have a lot of upper body rotation, even hip rotation at impact, sometimes letting that neck and head release will allow your chest and shoulders release. There's a balance point there. Like we don't necessarily teach that to everybody, but we'll teach that to some players. The other thing is, as kids, when you're swinging at it really fast, you've got all the mobility in the world to keep your head down and let your body release a little bit. But as you get older, joint mobility and flexibility starts causing problems. So it can cause you injuries.
Yes, it can. And don't keep your head down. That's all I got to say.
Don't do it.
Don't force it.
That's right. And again, last little bit on this. If you're a parent of a young kid that's playing the game and they mishit it, they don't hit it solid, don't tell them to keep their head down. Please, we beg you, don't. Let them go. Figure out why they're mishitting it. It's not because they're not trying to hit the golf ball. A lot of really good, if you ever played baseball at home, a lot of those guys never saw the bat hit the ball. They're actually looking out ahead. So same thing applies to golf.
Yeah. Second thing is backswing doesn't matter. I mean, we've been in here since August the 1st, and I will guarantee you that we work on backswing all the time, because the backswing, if you get your backswing in the correct position, it sets you up to make a good downswing. If you don't get your backswing in a good position, you're going to have to manipulate to get that club back to where you want it to get it back to.
Yeah, so talk a little bit more about like when people say backswings don't matter, because they said that from the fact of like you got Jim Furyk, you got Tiger Woods, you got Jack Nicklaus, you got David Duval, you got Matthew Wolff, you got Dustin Johnson. Like they're all completely different. And I see where people say this. One of my arguments is, okay, that's fine. If you're a world-class athlete and a world-class player, the backswing doesn't matter as much. Mm-hmm. Like, your backswing was a little bit different than what was taught back in the day. And again, if I'd like to think if Hal Sutton came into this academy when you were 25 or 6 and you were swinging at it the way you were swinging at it, we might make a small little cut, but we're not going to completely do surgery and change your backswing. But for your 10 or 15 handicaps at home that are slicing it or that are doing something, our job is to start where we see the first issue. And almost always it's earlier than most people think. Almost always where they see standing up at impact, or they see reverse pivot, or they see, whatever, not enough body rotation. It's happening way earlier than they think, halfway in the backswing or at the top of the backswing.
Totally agree with that. You said if I came in here at 25, we would make a small cut. We wouldn't make a major surgery. But shame on us if a 12 or 13-year-old comes in here
I love that.
And they've got a backswing that's way out of sorts, and we're not going to change that. I mean, they're 12 or 13 years old. We want to make life easier for them. Let me tell you, Jim Furyk is a really good friend of mine. And Jim and his dad worked consistently on this their whole life. I mean, he never had a different teacher. He always had the same teacher as his dad. They worked all the time. He worked on his golf swing all the time. He needed to. But a guy that's on plane all the time and has got a simple little golf swing, he doesn't have to work on that as hard. He doesn't have to. I mean, when you're here to here,
up and around,
up
like
and
Jim
around,
and
yeah.
guys,
I mean, that's a lot of work to maintain that.
Especially the timing required, not just when you're at home by yourself, but when you're in a money game. But then you reach the highest level that Jim did. Getting that thing to repeat when the pressure's really on and your speeds get a little bit off becomes really a challenge. And it's arguably why how tall was Jim?
Probably 6'2" or 3.
For 6'2", 6'3", not hitting it all that far. Now,
right.
Again, Jim's obviously had a great career and one of the best players
third leading money winner of all time
to ever play the game. So he was obviously successful. But he probably I'd love to talk to him about this at some point, but he probably felt like he had to really monitor his speed or he could get a little bit out of whack.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Jim did everything slow. I mean, he's, I'm not talking about him when I say this, but he's always been on the slower side.
Yeah.
And, he never really got fast with his golf swing either. You just can't.
Yeah.
You can't create the same speed there.
At what age do you not revamp the golf swing? And is it an age level or is it a talent level, or both?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I think that's dependent on the person themselves.
Yeah.
Kid gets in college, it might not be. We don't want to do major surgery at that point. Maybe depends on where they are in college. If they're not beating anybody yet.
Yeah.
And had no success, and we're trying to help them have some success.
Yeah.
But if they're beating some people already and shooting low scores, we got to think twice about making a deep cut.
Yeah. I think I've always thought this was a fascinating conversation because, and I was a little surprised at first that, you know, you made a comment to me one time, you know, Jim Furyk, Jim's golf swing didn't make Jim Furyk. Jim's mind made Jim Furyk.
Exactly.
And I love that because I've always felt the same way. Everybody said, oh, if you'd have changed Jim Furyk at a young age, you'd have ruined him. And I'm like, not if you did it early enough, you wouldn't have ruined him.
No. Jim was he was determined to win.
Yeah.
Determined to be the player that he was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, his determination is why he was there.
Yeah.
Not his golf swing or lack of.
Yeah.
You know, Jim's mindset was that of a champion.
Yeah.
And that's what many people miss out on.
Yeah. And then wouldn't you agree that, you know, as we get to 20, or as Jim got to 20, 25, 26, at that point, that's what you got. It's
That's what
you got to be
got.
real careful with.
It's hard to make changes. I mean, I tried to make some changes, and you know, I tried to make a change in the early '90s, and it just about ruined me. I lost my card and used a one-time exemption to keep my card, and then ended up going back to what I knew how to do, and ended up winning the next year.
Yep.
And
yeah, because what you did got you there.
Exactly.
If it got you there, and that's a mistake. A lot of players. This could be another podcast. A lot of young players will get there and be overwhelmed because they're up against a DJ or Tiger that do things a little bit better, and then they panic.
Well, and here's the other thing that happens once you get out there. You get there, and then everybody tells you what your shortcomings are and why you can't stay.
Right.
I had that happen too.
Right.
You know. So, I mean, and we're letting a guy pushing a pencil that doesn't know very much about golf.
Right.
He surfacely knows something about golf, con us into believing that we lack something, and we might really lack something, but listen to someone that really knows.
That's exactly right. That's pretty powerful. All right, so the next one is probably, outside of keep your head still, is probably the most, I believe, overused term or segment or intention in the game, and that's that we put down it's all in the hips. It's so many times we hear students coming in saying, oh, you know, I just got to fire my hips more, you know, or where does speed come from? Speed comes from the hips. And I honestly think that it's completely overblown. And what I mean by that is that, in my opinion, the lower body, the hips are the foundation, but it's not the, you know, we want the lower body to work correctly. But if we had a contest in here and we said, okay, for the next 6 months, everybody that comes in here, all we're going to do is work on the lower body. We're going to make the lower body perfect. It wouldn't be that difficult for us to get every player in here for them to pivot pretty spot on, pretty, you know, correctly, close to, you know, scratch level handicap, whatever. But to get the whole system to work correctly too, just because we got the hips to work correctly, the hips don't move very much compared to how far the hands and the arms and the shoulders move. So it would be really easy for us to move the hips correctly. But these players, some of these players would get better, but the majority of them, I personally don't think would, because the club face is still in a bad spot, and the only thing that hits the ball is the club face.
Yeah.
This one's another rant of mine.
Well,
I can go on this one for a while.
Well, this is one of the reasons, you know, one of the reasons why you and I are together right now.
That's exactly right.
Because when you were at my swing, I mean, I was intrigued with what three-dimensional golf said. I mean, unfortunately, I got intrigued as to why I had any success or what I was missing, and that's what drove me to want to do what we're doing now. Is I'm still trying to learn.
Yep.
And trust me, we never run out of learning.
Yep.
And or you shouldn't run out of learning. If you think you know it all, trust me, you're fixing to get past.
That's right.
But you know, I was at the PGA show, and I listened to a seminar that Chase did, and I waited around and asked him. I said, you know, I see everybody trying to fire their hips so fast, it's unbelievable. Looked way out of sorts to me. All the kids, you know, they weren't strong enough. The club was controlling them more, but they knew to fire their hips. So the club arms are way behind, hips are way forward. And, I mean, it just looks unorthodox completely, you know. And to me, a good golf swing is where nothing stands out.
Yep.
And I really like golf swings when nothing stands out. And you can make those hips stand out in a heartbeat.
100%. That's one thing I've stolen from you, is that you've said that you should never see transition. Like, you shouldn't. With really good players, you can tell by their rhythm. You know, I don't like to use rhythm and tempo a ton, but like, you just can't see them, you know, violently transitioning. And you know, a lot of the kids that are flexible and can move it, and even some of our better older players, you can see a jerk down or a move, and immediately that's off. One of the talking points with the hips that a lot of people don't realize is, we ask a fun little question with everybody that comes in, where do we get speed from? And everybody's like, lower body. Of course, it's lower body. Yeah, we use the ground. We need the foundation. But, if we ask, and we'll ask this question, who's got faster hips? The LPGA Tour women or the PGA Tour men? And when we ask the question, their radar's kind of up, like, okay, was this a trick question? But they normally say quickly, oh, the men do. They don't. The women do. The women rotate their hips faster than the men, and it's actually by quite a bit. The second question is, who rotates their rib cage or their chest faster, the men or the women? And normally, again, everybody says the men do. They don't. It's about a tie, but the women are actually just on average a little bit faster. So women move their hips faster and they move their chest faster than the men do. So again, we'll ask, where does speed come from? And the difference is, and it was interesting, I was blessed to work with Bryson a little bit and got him on the system, and we had 18 sensors all over the body. Think of like little Apple Watches all over the segments of the body. And we had him versus an LPGA Tour player, and her hips were rotating like 200 degrees per second faster than his were, like 15 to 20, 30 miles an hour faster. Like, it was a lot. And her chest was faster than his. And I went back and looked at the club head speed for both of these swings. And his club head speed was like 118, 119. He wasn't Hulk smash Bryson at the time, but he was still pretty fast. He was at like 120 and she was at 100. Like 99, 100. And she was way faster with her hips, quite a bit faster with her chest. His arm speed, his shoulder speed was infinitely faster. Club head speed, obviously, way faster. So where do we get speed from? We do not get speed from the hips. The hips, probably are around 15 to 20% of our overall speed production, where the rest comes from the arms. Think about throwing a Frisbee at home. If you were going to throw a Frisbee and you just fired the hips and the arms stayed plastered across your chest, you're not going to throw it very far. But it's the timing, it's everything working together, it's the sequencing of the energy passing from the hips, the rib cage, up the body to the arms and shoulders, down to the hands, is how we create speed. Speeding up the arms is oftentimes the easiest way to increase clubhead speed, and that's a no-no to a lot of, I would say, the older generation of golfers, because you guys were taught the complete opposite for so long.
So y'all see why I like working with this guy, because he knows an awful lot of stuff, and it's different than what I knew to begin with, and I've been intrigued with all of this stuff. It's fascinating to me. Today's podcast, where we're talking about the misdemeanors that we've heard of forever.
Right.
It's how did we get as far as we got with what we knew? That's how I would say this right now. And I mean, I'm still learning, and I know this for a fact. Simpleness is what we look for. How do we make this simpler for them to do?
Yeah.
And, I can assure you that fast hips is not simpler.
No. And if you think about it, too, I think the one thing that we both strive to do and we do a good job of is if everyone at home came in, or everyone listening at home came in for a lesson, we're going to try and look at each person as its own puzzle, and we're going to try and fit the pieces together the best way we can. And the point I'm making here is that we don't want everybody to go home and swing their arms faster, because their arm swing might be fast enough. Most people we see, their arms are trailing the body. Very few people do we see their arms are too fast past the body. But the message is, you guys at home have to find out why you're struggling with what you're struggling and try and put that piece together, not just take some random Golf Digest tip that you read and just think it applies to you and everybody else, because it doesn't. And that's the hard part, and that's the reason why a lot of guys don't improve their golf swings, because they never figure out that one piece that they're missing, or they need to take away, or they need to add to the puzzle.
Well, hopefully we're talking about some things here that y'all have questioned in your own mind at this point.
Yeah.
This next one segues into the last one a little bit. Arms should always be slow and passive, Tell them what you think about that, Chase.
Yeah, so again, this idea of, and I would say passive arms tends to be a little bit more of a good player problem. Your junior golfer that swings their body too fast, arms get stuck behind, the path gets, shifted inside out, more of a draw type pattern. So any of you guys that hit big hooks at home, You might hit big pushes, big hooks. You might hit behind it a little bit. We talk about low point control all the time in here. Oftentimes what we'll see is arms that are behind the chest. So if you take your lead arm, so I'm a right-handed golfer, so you take your left arm and you just make a grip, and then you make a backswing where your left elbow kind of goes into your chest a little bit, and then you just rotate your body into kind of a finish position where the elbow stays across your chest. That would be a situation where arms are a little bit too slow, and it tends to shift the path to the right, and it tends to move low point back behind the ball. So you're going to chunk it at times, you're going to drop kick it at times, you may shank it at times. And so, again, a lot of that is we've got to feel our arms swinging a little bit. We've got to, really the only way to get shaft lean, to get the hands ahead, is for the arms to be fairly forward. It's never going to be back behind to get shaft lean. And so, again, there's a blend, and I don't want everybody to run home and fire their arms from the top, but just know that the arms are not passive. The guys on tour swing their arms way faster than LPGA Tour players. So if arms were passive, then the PGA Tour players would swing their arms slower. The slower the arm speed, the faster we hit it, and that is not the case at all.
Well, one of the points that we're always looking for is when the shaft is parallel to the ground, how far their arms have traveled.
That's exactly right.
And I will guarantee you the better players, the arms have traveled further at that point.
Amen.
I mean, you can pull up, look at Rory McIlroy, as you look at any of the better players on the tour, their arms when the shaft is parallel, their hand is in the middle of their thigh to in front of their right thigh, their trail leg.
That's exactly right.
And the higher handicap you are, your arms are going to be further here. You will have gone ahead and thrown the shaft a little bit.
Yep.
And you've given up a lot of your speed already by that point.
That's exactly right. So for those listening, on the downswing, when the club is parallel to the ground on the downswing, so if you're looking at us from like the caddy view or from face on where the camera's pointed at the chest, go to YouTube, take a video or look at all the guys that swing at it really well, and when the club is parallel to the ground on the downswing, their hands need to be somewhere around the middle of their trail thigh. And what you'll find is with higher handicap players, their hands are farther back. They're farther behind the trail thigh, and they're usually higher up, and then the club has been released, and so we've lost all of our leverage, a little bit of lag, all of our power has been thrown away because the arms aren't quite as far forward. And so we have to figure out as teachers why they aren't forward enough. Is your backswing too long? Did you fire your hips too soon? Like, there's a lot of reasons why. But this whole adage of arms have to be slow and passive is just, in our opinion, it's just not correct.
I'm working on speeding mine up.
So the next one is one that again, your generation, Hal, heard a lot of, and that was restrict the hips, increase the X factor, maintain right knee bend in the backswing.
Yeah, I heard maintain the right flex in the right knee.
Yeah.
And
I don't know, looking at your swing, even like 2,000 players, you didn't really do it. It seemed like you let the right knee straighten a little bit.
Well,
maybe subconsciously, but
yeah, I don't think it was something that I consciously did. I think it just got to that point. But I heard it all the time, and Hogan started a little bit of that, even though he didn't do that.
No, he did not. And quickly, we don't want the trail knee to completely hyperextend. We don't, we teach a unrestricted hip turn where we're allowing the hips to turn pretty deep. We want to let the right knee straighten. We don't want to necessarily lock it out to a point where it's locked out. Right. And so to talk about a little bit about why this was taught, restrict the hips. Everyone thought that if you could restrict the hip turn and turn deeper, you were increasing what they called X factor. And so the X factor was the difference in shoulder turn, chest turn versus hip turn. So the idea was you turn your shoulders 90 degrees, you turn your hips 45. So that stretch, that 45 degree of difference, you were basically stretching the rubber band. The problem is a lot of people can't stretch the rubber band that much. And so what happens is we end up getting too much stress on the system. The low back L5S1 in your low back starts to get too much stress on it, and we start having hip pain. The other thing is what we found is when you stretch and the hips don't turn, the hips they'll end up firing off too early, and then we get into a whole host of problems. The head backs up, the body backs up, and we get too much tilt and all this stuff. So what we found is that if you the holy grail in this stretch, and this is a little technical, but I'm going to go into it just briefly. We want to maximize hip rotation to where we can get 45 to 50 degrees of hip rotation. We maximize shoulder rotation to where we get 90 plus, depending on what club. More so with the driver, 90s plenty with an iron. But then the stretch is in transition. We want the hips to stretch out just a little bit. It's about 4 or 5 degrees. That's called the X factor stretch, and that's where we tighten up that rubber band and pull in that rubber band to where then everything snaps and is let go. But the hard part is, especially as you get older, if we're trying to stretch that rubber band too much in the backswing, we basically lose it all, and we're really at a high risk for low back pain.
Y'all get that? I heard it all the time. They use the word coil a lot with me.
Right.
And you can still coil because your feet never move.
Yep.
They're still planted in the same spot. We work a lot on good footwork here. Mm-hmm. We don't want the foot going too soon. We don't want the foot going the wrong way, the trail foot. And, I don't want my right knee flex staying completely flexed. Yep. I can't, as I get older, especially all you guys and girls out there that get older, we can't stretch as much in our back. So if we get a little bit more turn from our hips because we didn't restrict the right knee, then we get a little bit further back, we get a little bit more speed, we get a little bit more distance. And I know we've not met anybody in here. They all come in here wanting more distance.
Yep.
So this should be music to your ears. This might be a place that you might find another mile or two of speed.
That's exactly right. Without stretching out the system too much.
Exactly.
That's the cool part. It's a free rotation, free motion. Lengthens the backswing a little bit, as Hal mentioned, and again, plenty of research out there shows slightly longer backswing equals slightly more distance. The long drive guys out there are not making short little backswings.
No.
They're making long backswings.
No.
So next one, stay in posture. We got to stay in posture. Can't come out of posture. Any kind of extension is bad. Were you taught this?
Was I taught this?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I'm sure you heard it. I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
if you implemented it or not, but you definitely heard it. Because didn't you get criticized early on that you came out of it? Somebody
They thought I came out of posture in the downswing.
Yeah, that's right.
A lot. I mean, a lot of people. I finished way too straight up and down. They thought, and
What you didn't look like
stay in right tilt.
You didn't look like Hogan, so you couldn't play. Is that what?
Yeah. Even though I was taught by a guy where he knew Hogan inside and out.
Yeah. Right.
There's a lot of things. If you're a champion, if you have the mindset and the heart of a champion, we couldn't stop you from being that. One of the things that you can't mess up somebody that's destined to do this, that wants it that bad. I mean, you might slow them down, but their will is to have it.
Yeah.
And, so there are exceptions to the rule.
Yeah.
You agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think of guys like Lee Trevino figured it out and had the mindset and then turned into a world-class ball striker. One of your close friends you mentioned a lot, and we'll probably have him on it sometime, is Curtis Strange.
Right.
Curtis, won 2 or 3 U.S. Opens?
Back-to-back.
Back-to-back U.S. Opens. I mean, to win back-to-back U.S. Opens, it's just unbelievable. But, and again, we'll probably talk to him about this, but he didn't think that his swing methods all the time were perfect for him, and he won despite of it.
Well, I mean, everybody thought you had to have a straight left arm, and Curtis won 2 U.S. Opens back-to-back with a left arm bent that much. You can't keep – he was one of the meanest guys I knew on the golf course.
Yeah.
He wanted it worse than anybody I knew. That's my point. Curtis makes my point for me.
Yep.
And, so all these things that we're talking about, you can't slow people down like that. But what we're really talking about is for the youngsters that are coming up, don't get hung up on these things.
Yep.
And if you're an older player out there, if some of these things that we're talking about right now you are really dogmatic about and forcing right now, you might try giving up that force and seeing where this takes you.
Yep. Focus on another thing. this kind of goes into a point we ran into a couple times today with some players, good players coming in and thought, one especially thought he had a host of problems. And we really fine-tuned it down to one little thing that cleaned up a lot of other issues. And he was really hard on himself. And most of the time when you guys are struggling with your ball striking, most of the time, especially if you've played at a fairly decent level at some point, most of the time it's something fairly simple to get it back. It's not, you don't need to blow up the house and start over. You just need to fix a couple of light fixtures and your house will get back in order. So, I kind of felt like these guys were extra hard on themselves and didn't really need to be. Like, golf's hard enough. It's going to kick our tails enough. Like, talk about, and how you do a good job of this, but talk to them about the good thing. These guys at home need to realize, like, most of the time, if you can play at a certain level, your golf swing is pretty dang good. We just need to make small little tweaks.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I'm really big on is people come in here looking for answers. I've been looking for answers my whole life. That's why I'm doing this, as a matter of fact. Right. Still looking for answers. But we come in here and they feel judged. I felt judged every time I went to take a lesson, and we go in there looking for those answers. First thing that the teacher spit out is what's wrong. This is what I see. This is what's wrong. And many times I left and never felt like I did anything right. And so one of the things that I like to do is, this is not just true in golf, but this is true in life too. Just pretend you got a cup right here in front of you. And if I'm going to take all the love out of the cup with telling you what's wrong, then I need to put some love back in there and tell you what you do right, so that there is some of those things that says, hey, this is worth trying. I'm not lost. I don't have to tear the house down, like you said.
Right.
And, and this is a bad problem with better players, because we're judging ourselves every day when we get finished. What do we do when we finish? We talk about everything that's wrong. What do I need to fix? And we get less grateful for the things that we do right. And, pretty soon, if you stay down that path, nothing will be right. And what does that do? That destroys your confidence.
That's exactly right. And I keep going back to this idea that golf is going to destroy you anyway, so you might as well try and keep filling your cup up.
Yes.
Because it's just too hard.
This is such a hard game. I mean, I can tell you right now, everybody out there listening, you don't have it all figured out. There's something right now that you wish you had. And, I mean, if you're a golfer, there's something you wish you had. It may be more distance. It may be not laying a sod over it. It may be not sculling it. It may be not shanking it.
Sure.
It may be make a putt every now and then. But you're listening because you're hoping to find out something.
That's exactly right. So with going back to the stay in posture, we want to use extension. We want to use the ground to push up to the best of our abilities at the right time. A lot of people come in talking about, I got to stay in posture, I got to keep my head perfectly still. No, you don't. Do we want to early extend and come out of posture too soon? No, not really. But this idea is there is a loading and unloading of the ground. We want to load down, then we want to extend. And somebody, if you stay down forever, if you stay in posture forever, you're going to kind of look like a much older player that has kind of an old golf swing, because you'll see the head staying down forever instead of extending up and out. So this idea that we've got to keep our head perfectly still, or we've got to stay in posture forever, it's never going to happen. You're just not going to do it. There is an up and down motion to the golf swing.
I was able to come out of extension pretty good for a while there.
You did a pretty good job of it.
I had my left side kind of not really like what I was doing anymore, and I've got the old man's disease where I stayed
head
in
stayed
posture,
forward
head
too
stayed
long,
forward, and everything went left, and it just didn't feel right. Never has felt right, and I always felt better when I got up and out of the shot sooner.
It's a power source too, definitely. The last one is one that my dad preached to me some, and I think it was because he read it in Golf Digest or whatever, but it was toe up. And what we mean by toe up is, in the takeaway, basically club parallel to the ground is getting the toe straight up and down, and then in the finish, club parallel to the ground in the finish, getting the toe up, straight up and down. So it's like this full face rotation release type thing. And when we were talking about doing this, I asked you if you had been told that, and you said, oh yeah, lots.
A lot.
So what is, toe up, what does that mean to you, and what do we know now?
Well, what that means to me is it would work if the ball was sitting up here on a tee.
Yeah.
And we were standing straight up and down and swinging like a baseball bat.
Yeah.
But since we're bent over and, the plane is more, for y'all out there, it's more like this.
Yep.
That means the face has got to be a little bit like this.
Yep.
It's straight up and straight down to the spine angle, basically.
Yep. So the plane is a little bit more. We swing on an inclined plane. So yeah, we want the toe up would be toe up to kind of the angle of your rib cage.
Right.
And then the release. And so toe up would be excess face rotation.
Right.
It would require an extra piece of timing that's not necessary.
Right.
Right. Not saying you can't play, if you're a world-class player out there listening to this and you rotate the face a little bit, you can obviously play good golf. There's been plenty of players that have done it. But if you're struggling with fades or slices or even some hooks and stuff, and you've got all this face manipulation through impact, it could be just because you're keeping it a little bit too open coming back and making it a little harder on yourself.
Well, and here's another thing, too. You wake up feeling differently every day.
Yeah.
And when you have to manipulate that face that much to make it go straight, some days you're going to be better at it than other days.
Yep.
And
well, that was kind of fun. I felt like I got some stuff off my chest.
Well, we've got next week is the Masters, and I know everybody's looking forward to that. And I've got
a friend of yours, a Masters champion, former Masters champion. Do we want to leave it up to suspense? Let them figure out.
Yeah, let's leave it up to to your curiosity.
Former Masters champion, good friend of Hal's, will be on with us next week.
He will be, and he'll be there.
Awesome. Well, look forward to that. Hopefully you guys got something out of this one. This was fun, definitely fun for me to do. And if there's any more misconceptions that you think we need to put a squash to, we can do a Misconceptions 2.0 here in a few weeks. But again, as always, if you guys have any questions, comments, thoughts, hit us up on social media, Hal Sutton Golf, Chase Cooper Golf. Again, these are a blast for us to do, and we're just trying to make it fun and entertaining, and hopefully you guys learn something.
See you next week.
Be the right club today. Yes!